Hello, I was 52 years old, living in Canada and selling into the US when one of my competitors told me something I couldn't ignore. But he said he could build my products in China for half the cost. That was the hook. I bought a plane ticket and left. Now, what I thought would be a simple cost-saving trip turned into a whole new ballgame. The collapse of one marriage into another and a string of factory disasters, forcing me to realize if I wanted quality, I was going to have to build my own factory. So stay tuned. Let's get into it. So the reason I went to China was simple. I had to stay competitive. The competitors were already building there. And once I heard I could get my products for half the price, I knew I had to see it for myself. My attention was piqued. I was building big inflatable slides in Canada, and one slide that was costing me about $12,000 to build. He said he could build it for half the price, $5,000. That was a big difference. That's what hooked me. So I bought my first plane ticket. Off I went to China. At first, the trips felt simple enough. I booked into hotels, factories, gave me tours. They showed me all around, took me out for dinners. It was great. We were transferring files, visiting factories, looking at products, and started trying to understand how this whole system worked. That was the beginning. At first, I would spend maybe 2 or 3 weeks at a time in China. Then I'd go back home to Canada for a month, and then I'd fly back again. Of course, over the year, something changed. My stays in China were getting longer, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And every time I went back home, I was actually heading back to China even sooner. And eventually some of my Chinese friends told me, why don't you just rent an apartment here? It's so cheap. Then when you come back, everything's set to go. So after a year, I had an apartment in China. Now I was living in 2 worlds. One life in Canada, the other life in China. But the truth is, my life in Canada was fading. My second marriage wasn't strong. Our kids were grown. The more problems that came up back home, the longer I stayed in China. After about a year and a half, I made the separation official. I just didn't want to keep living with the fighting, the nagging, and problems over each other's kids. I'd grown tired of it. I could feel something else was opening up in China, and whether that was right or wrong at the time, I just knew that was the direction for me. So I kept going. I actually remember one morning in China, in the hotel, standing in the shower, and suddenly this sadness just came over me. I welled up because I realized something very clearly at that moment. My old life was dying. The new life was being reborn, and I didn't look back. I pushed ahead. I built stronger relationships. I started working with more factories. I spread my production around. But very quickly, I was quick to learn, and most important life lesson in my life, you cannot trust factories to go the extra mile when your back is turned. That was the big lesson I learned. When I was there in the factory, everything seemed fine. But the moment I went back to Canada, or even just back to my apartment, decisions were being made against me. Those decisions were not being made for quality. They're not being made for my customers. They were being made to save the factory money. Their favorite line was always the same, "We saving you money." And at first it sounded helpful, but what it really meant was we changed something. We downgraded something. We substituted something. Now my product is cheap product. That pattern kept repeating. If they didn't have a $2 part, they wouldn't go up to a $250 part. They would go down to a $1.50 part. If they didn't have the right color, they wouldn't wait and get the proper color. They'd substitute another one and just tell me, close enough, we save you money. I remember specifying red, blue, and yellow. I came back, they had swapped out the yellow and used orange from the stock. When I asked why, they acted like nothing had changed. No. We still use colors. We use red and blue, and we use orange. We save you money. But I would say to them, that's not the point. The point was that my customer wanted the yellow. That was the beginning for me to understand a deeper truth. I was not dealing with factories the same way I was thinking. I'm a designer and a builder. I cared about the products, the details, the customer, the long-term reputation. They were often thinking short-term, how to get the order out the door with the least cost to them. Some close Chinese friends of mine started saying, Peter, maybe it's time for you to think about starting your own factory. And to be honest, I like the idea. See, my Chinese friends used Chinese thinking, saving time or money to help me improve my situations. It's just that the factory thinking I did not like. So in our spare time, we started driving around looking at an empty factory buildings. That was now roughly 2.5 years ago into my China experience. And at one point, I actually found a building and came very close to putting down the money. In China, you have to put up big deposits, about 4 months' rent. And I was there, I had the money, and I was almost ready to do it. But that night, I tossed and turned. Something didn't feel right. I just didn't feel strong enough yet. I still didn't trust people in China. I still didn't understand enough of the China system. So even though I came very close, I backed out. I put the idea on the shelf. And looking back now, maybe the timing was actually better than I realized. A lot of things in China were taking off at that time. There was energy in the air. People were starting businesses everywhere. Factories were booming and popping up. Opportunities were everywhere back then. 15 years ago, well, 10 years ago, China was always trying to get the foreigners involved because a foreigner face helped attract other foreign customers. But I kept stepping back. I didn't want to be trapped in other people's dreams. I didn't want to jump too early. So instead, I kept jobbing my work out to the factories. Now that turned out to be expensive. One of the biggest disasters I faced involved a large inflatable slide I sold into Ireland. I sold that slide for $17,000 retail. It was a big deal. But after it arrived, the materials started cold cracking. The weather there was cooler. The material was breaking down in hairline cracks. The customers kept trying to repair it, but the cracks just kept showing up. Eventually, the customer asked for a replacement, and I had to agree with them. This wasn't a poor service issue. It was a material defect. No bones about it. So I took it back to the factory reps, and I fought with them up and down the hallways, trying to get them to admit the material was wrong because they kept walking away from me, so I kept grabbing their arm. And then they'd say, maybe the customer can repair it this way, or maybe they can try to do this. I kept telling them, we've already tried all of it. It's no good. It's a defect. My customer needs a new slide. They wouldn't admit fault. So in the end, I made the decision myself. We rebuilt the slide and sent out a replacement. It still cost us a lot of money, $5,000 material, labor, which was not a killer, and that was another lesson. Then came a bigger disaster, the Philippines water park. At that time, I thought I was working with a reputable factory. So We're on the beach. We're all excited. My team's there. The buyer's team is there. We were unpacking the units on the beach, inflating them, laying them out, starting the inflation. It should have been a great moment. Instead, things started falling apart right there in front of everyone. As we tied units together and tightened them up, the attachments came loose. Stitching was falling off. Then the units, internal structures started failing, and they would pop and swell and balloon up because it had the wrong materials on the inside of the inflatable. It was happening live right there on the beach in front of my customer. I was furious. I got on the phone with the factory and I let them have it. They started sending replacement pieces, but that took 2 weeks. Then more pieces failed. Then more replacements had to come. 2 weeks became 4 weeks. 4 became 6. 6 became 8. Then my big slide failed on that same part. At that point, the whole thing became a nightmare. I stayed there, kept patching, kept replacing, kept trying to hold it all together. But by that stage, I looked terrible. I looked like the guy who didn't know what I was doing. My customer, who was my partner, was losing faith. And about 3 to 4 months later, after all this chaos, my partner finally said he wanted me out. He bought me out of the deal. The only blessing in that whole mess was that the park was making money while it was operating, and I got my share out of it. But the damage was done. By then, I'd seen enough. So I was sick of them always telling me, we're saving you money. We're saving you money. Well, in the reality, they were costing me money. I was going to have to build my own factory. And by then, my life in China was changing too. Now, I had met a nice China woman, my wife, my new wife, and that changed everything. Because now I had deeper roots. There's more to tell you all about that later on down. So anyways, I learned enough, suffered enough, and seen enough to know that the only real path forward was to stop depending on other factories. That's what led me to start my own factory. And that's where the whole next chapter begins. Because now it's just not the factory. Now I'm dealing with Chinese workers. Let me tell you more about that. So when my wife and I started our own factory, I want to tell you more about what came after that. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And if you ever have experiences with factories, suppliers, business partnerships, or building something in another country, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your story. I might use parts of it in an upcoming episode. I'll see you in the next one. Like, subscribe. Thank you. Bye-bye.